Hello, everybody. Tim Holley here again today, and we have Jaredsrail with Long River Realty, one of our top producing agents. And he's also, and you've seen him on our show before, he's also an appraiser, owns JR Appraisal Services. And what we're here to talk about today is cash sales on homes. A lot of people do not get an appraisal because they think that they're paying cash, they don't need one. So we're going to dive in a little bit into that today and see maybe why people need to rethink that. How you doing today, Jared?
I'm good, Tim. Thanks for having me on again. It's always good to talk real estate.
Yeah, and this is one that comes up all the time, and we'll have some examples because you come across the same deals I come across on the real estate side of not having appraisals and cash buyers, and we'll share stories and thoughts and something that hopefully people maybe rethink about. The advantage a lot of times paying cash is quicker closes, but sometimes when you do something a little too quick, the outcome's not the greatest. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you see and your perspective as an appraiser?
Well, a couple things come to mind. First, of course, I'm an appraiser. I'm going to tell everybody they should get an appraisal, right? Come
Yeah,
hire me. No, I will be the first to tell you that there are situations that are low risk where an appraisal isn't a big deal. An appraisal isn't necessary if you know what kind of a situation you're getting in and that you're getting in good. You have specifics on a market. Maybe it's a flip house that you're getting extremely cheap, but it's always a good idea to make sure, are you getting it as cheap as you want? Are you getting it as cheap as you think? There's a lot of math that goes into that. Because even on a flip, um, you're looking at what's it worth now, how much am I putting in, and what's it going to be worth when it's done. And I can help with the what's it worth now, what's it going to be worth when it's done. As the person doing the flip, it's up to them how much they're going to spend, and that kind of thing. But in order to tell you what it's worth when it's done, I need to know what you're putting into it. Now, back away from the flip side of things for a minute here, and just a regular cash buyer, you know, um, you might think, oh, I don't need an appraisal. I'm paying cash. You don't have to have an appraisal. That's absolutely right. But should you get an appraisal? If you're buying a $400,000 house or a $500,000 house with cash, that what if it's only worth 450 on a $500,000 purchase, or 475? Or maybe it's 490. Even if it's a little bit off of what you're paying for the house, maybe you want it for a specific reason. You can overpay a little bit, but you want to be able to make an educated decision. And that's where the appraisal comes in, is to make sure you're not overpaying by more than you think, or if that's the situation. But I mean, I got lots of examples I can give you,
yeah.
but
Yeah, and
you
one
know,
that comes to mind to me, because and I know you'll probably one of your examples is some of these people that go out there on these for sale by owners, and two parties get together and they think it's a great deal, and a lot of times people think, hey, you know what, this is my forever home. Well, unfortunately, in today's day and age, stuff happens, and not everything is a forever home. Things change, and you know, if you get yourself in a situation, a lot of times the realtors or brokers are going to run comparable market analysis for you to make sure you're in the ballpark. And sometimes there's people that say, well, I'm willing to pay more, but I recommend an appraisal. And why don't you give us some examples of the importance of getting appraisal, especially on the exit strategy for you to take a look at?
all right. Well, one example that comes to mind. This is a real situation. I get a call from, and let me explain the process. By the way, too, when I get a call. So Tim Holley is a buyer of a property. He's paying cash for the property, and he calls me and says, "Hey, I need to get an appraisal. How much is that going to cost me?" Well, I need a little more information before I can answer that question. Okay. And the reason that that's important is we'll get to in a minute, but um, every appraisal doesn't cost the same amount. A couple of things I need to know is, is it a complex property? Is it a weird property? Is it going to be a lot more work? Our fees generally are based on how much time we think we're going to put into the appraisal. So when you call me and you ask me how much an appraisal is going to cost, first thing I'm going to ask is what's the address? And then I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to see what the house is. Okay, looks like a pretty standard house. I'm going to check and make sure there's adequate sales data to develop a reliable appraisal. Okay. Um, if you're buying a $2 million house in an area where houses are normally $200,000 to $300,000, there may not be any
Right.
comps for that.
Right.
Okay, and I can't really produce a credible appraisal for something like that. I mean, appraisals primarily, it's not the only valuation method, but for the most part, there's got to be a market for the house. And how we prove what the market is for a house is by comps, meaning other houses like that house that have sold or as close as possible. And I'm really simplifying things a little bit, but when you call and ask, that's the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that there's adequate sales data. So that brings me back to one of my examples I want to give you. Guy calls me and says, "Hey, I need to get an appraisal." I give him a quote. I've looked at potential sales in the neighborhood to make sure I had good data, and you know, give him a quote for how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. And then he calls me back about an hour later and he says, "Hey, my brother's an attorney in Wisconsin or whatever it was, and he says I don't need an appraisal." Okay, well, that's true. You don't need an appraisal. Now, I've already looked at the data. I already know what this contract is. I already have an idea of what the house might be worth because I have already looked at some comps. I cannot ethically, as an appraiser, tell you, "Hey, you're overpaying for this house." But that example I'm giving was a situation where his contract price looked to be higher by about 15% than what the house was probably worth. But go ahead and trust your brother, who's an attorney, that tells you you don't need an appraisal. You don't need an appraisal. That is true. But do you want to overpay for the house? Or do you want to be sure? Do you want to spend, you know, depending on the house, but let's say $600-700 to on a regular house to value the house and find out if it's actually worth what you're paying. If you're dumping $400,000, you know, $600 or $700 for peace of mind is probably a good thing.
Yeah,
Um,
especially because life happens. So if someone does that and they think it's be a long term and now it becomes a short term and they got to turn around and sell it, they're probably going to take a hit on it.
yeah, yeah. If they end up having to turn around and sell it is a big deal. And that particular property, the reason that he thought it was a good deal or he thought it was a good price was based on the lot size of the property. Well, do you know what lots are worth in that neighborhood? And coming from somewhere else is thinking, that, to get a house on a half acre instead of a quarter acre, that's going to be worth a lot more money. Well, in this particular neighborhood, it isn't a ton more money. The land is cheap in that area. And so that's something that I could see. I can get a handle on it real quick. And I would have loved to tell him, you should get an appraisal. It's not going to appraise, but I can't go into an assignment with a predetermined result. You know, I shouldn't give any indication of what a value might be going into an assignment because I need to go through the assignment. I might have got out there and realized this house is nicer than I thought, and it is worth that much. So I can't put myself in that position. I can't ethically do that. I have to go through the process of the appraisal before I can give any indications of a potential opinion of value, right? Um, and so, but that was one where I'm going. In my mind, I'm thinking he really should get an appraisal. right?
Right.
And that was his first thought was I should get an appraisal, but because he didn't need one, decided, I'll save 500 or 600 bucks. Well, it probably cost him 20 or 30 in the end,
Isn't that how it
you know.
usually is?
Uh,
Yep.
so that, I mean, that's one example. I've got other examples as well of other scenarios and other reasons why. Um, if you want, I can dive right into another example.
Yeah, and
Uh,
one question before you dive into that, because I'd love to hear them all. I think in California, aren't theirs, they before they even list the homes, they have to get an appraisal? Is that part of the requirement in California? I mean, because the only reason why I say that, we're in Arizona, but we're so close to the California border, everything seems to flow downhill towards Arizona. Do you see that as a requirement in the future that they're going to require homes to be appraised before they put them on the market?
I don't think that that's going to be a requirement in the future, and I don't know if that is a rule in California. And you're talking on all transactions. Um, I whether it's a loan or a you're saying before they even list the
Yeah,
house.
I've heard a few people say, "Oh, I'm getting ready to list my house, but I have to do my appraisal first." And that one threw me for a loop. And they just said, "Yeah, where we're at, we have to do appraisals prior to listing the home," which I'm all for. I would vote for that all day long because, we get to some places and people say, "Well, I need this much money out of my house because I want to buy this house in a different state." And you're like, "But that's not how it works. The value's the value." So I'd love to see it someday that, that for everybody's benefit, that the appraisal gets done on a house prior to it being listed. So I wasn't sure if you heard any scuttlebutt that that could be coming around.
I haven't, and I'm going to be looking into that. I'm curious, but and pre-listing appraisals are something that we do and are good in certain situations. Again, I'm not going to tell everybody, yeah, you should definitely do that on every property. Um, in some situations, it is a really good idea when you're dealing with and this is the most common reason I see it, is when you're dealing with a property that's outside of the norm. It's a little complicated to figure out the value on the house because do you want an appraiser to tell you what it probably is worth? That doesn't necessarily tell you what your listing strategy should be. That it comes down to the agent. What is their listing strategy? But
Right.
figuring out the value on a complicated house, it would be good to have that value coming from an appraiser as opposed to the agent. Some agents are very, very good at valuing properties. I've seen some that are further off, but on a regular house, it's probably not as important as on a house that's more complicated.
Right.
You have a lot of additional structures or acreage or complexities that an agent may not be sure how to handle. So, you don't want to leave a bunch of money on the table, and you also don't want to overprice it and not have any activity, and then lose money in the process. Because that costs you money if
Right.
if you're not successful with the deal by getting it priced right in the beginning. So,
Right. So I didn't mean to throw us off track and get us going somewhere else, but tell us some more of the situations that you've run into on cash deals done without appraisals.
so another example, and this one I see frequently, is I'm being called out to do an appraisal for a refinance where somebody bought a house and they just figured, it'll be easier. I'm just going to pay cash. I'm going to get a better price. It's easier to negotiate. Everybody likes cash, right? So I'm going to get a better deal by doing a cash purchase, and I have the ability to do it. But then 3 months, 6 months, a year later, they're wanting to refinance so that they can get their cash back to do other things with. Well, if you didn't get an appraisal when you paid cash for the house, and you ended up overpaying, and then you go to do the refi and there's not enough equity in the house to pull out the 80% you want to pull out, or you were expecting to be able to pull out. You were planning to do an 80-20 loan, and now the house is only worth 90% of what you paid for it because you overpaid in the first place. And I've seen that happen time and again. um, Values do change. So if you're looking to pull most of the money back out of a house, it might be better just to do the loan in the first place, because
Right.
when you buy it today, there's no telling that it's necessarily going to be worth the same number a year later. Um, values change. So if you're going, okay, I'm going to do an 80% loan next year and I'll just get all my money back out of it. Well, 80% of what it appraises a year later for might be different than what it appraises for now. That doesn't even mean you overpaid for the house. That could be a change in the market. That could be a number of different things. But knowing that you're not overpaying when you buy it with cash to me is important. And you'd like to think you're getting a good deal when you're buying it cash.
Right.
A lot of, I mean, you tell me, Tim, but from what I've seen, I want to see what you say, but what I've seen with sellers and cash buyers, it's not like they're going to give you 10% off of the price because you're coming in with cash.
No.
Because even if they're going and getting a loan, if they're well qualified, they get their cash when it closes either way, whether it's a cash buyer or a loan buyer. And in both situations, they can do home inspections. In both situations, they can come back with the same requests, whether it's cash or not. They still want the house to be in a certain condition. Do you see the same thing? Or,
Yeah, and so, and a lot of things that people need to realize, some of these cash buyers too, they say, well, I have cash. Well, that's what a loan is. A loan is cash too. The cash might speed up the deal, but if you're a seller and there's a certain mark you want to get, sometimes sellers don't care if it's cash or financing. The financing now, especially, we're not in that heavy, hurry up, get in line and wait for, to get the appraisals or to get the inspections or to get what needs to be done. Sometimes
yep,
cash doesn't speed that up, and I've seen it when someone says, well, yeah, I got cash, I can do this, I don't need to go get a loan, but they might have a CD they're waiting to mature, and so what they have to pull, or the 401k, or where they have to pull their money, can take them just as long to get their money available to purchase as if you would have got a loan. And so it's, cash sometimes is good, sometimes you can get it quicker, but buying a home is a high dollar transaction. Why do you want to rush it? Why do you want to say, hey, I got cash, I can close in 7 days? You do something like that, and it's like, oh, there's going to be a mistake made somewhere here or there. And generally, it comes down to in the value of the home.
yeah. And I mean, I closed one. There was a cash sale within a few days. That's the fastest one I've done, and everybody's got to be on top of it for that to even happen, because you still have title stuff that has to happen, and so a few days is pretty fast. A week to 2 weeks is what I usually see on cash sales.
Right.
Um, but right now, I've seen loan deals close in 3 weeks.
Yeah, and
Now
that's what I'm saying
that's
is
hurrying a little bit, but 30 days is normal. That's normal. That's every loan officer generally can do a loan in 30 days right now in
yeah,
most areas.
and unless the house is vacant, the seller needs time to pack, relocate, do what they have to do. So, that's been an incentive for vacant homes, is to get the cash with the quick close, because whether it was an investor that did a flip, they want their money back. Whether if life happens and now the kids are handling the sell, or the people have moved out, they're gone, they just want their money, they want to get the house taken care of. Those are generally the advantages of maybe closing a little bit quicker. But you still, if you're not using an agent that will tell you the truth, we've got to remember, being ethical, we don't work for the commission, we work for the client. So, it's sometimes the best yes is a no, by telling the people, wait, no, 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 wait a minute, you're paying a little bit too much for this house, and quick close, and that's wonderful. But I think the still National Association average, homes are generally selling within about a 3% mark of what they're being listed for. Because if you have you know, agents and brokers that are sophisticated and they know how to do all the software, know how to do the analysis and the compare, CMAs, they're generally going to have it, pretty close right on to the true value of the home. I've seen it in the for sale by owners where those are way out of whack. But
Yep.
using a professional, you're going to keep it pretty close in values. And the one that closed quickly, they were very fortunate to have you as their agent, because you're also an appraiser, and representing them, you would have seen a red flag if it would have popped up, because you're experienced, you're seasoned. But the worry is, and I'm not talking bad about anybody, but again, if you get some of these agents that may be new and they got to pay the rent or the mortgage or the car payment, and they catch themselves working for the commission versus for the client, that's where some problems can come in.
Yeah, and I mean, as an appraiser and an agent, I have to be very careful in those roles, right? That when I'm acting as an agent, I am not acting as an appraiser. You do get the benefit of the knowledge of being a longtime appraiser, your agent being a longtime appraiser, but I'm not performing an appraisal. I'm not acting as an appraiser. I have to be very careful that those roles are clear, and that's what allows us to do both. I can't appraise obviously my own transactions. That'd
Right.
be a conflict. As you know, Tim, I go as far as I don't want my appraisers who work for my company even appraising anything that's represented by any agent at Long River Realty. And that's probably pushing those boundaries a little further than they need to be. But I'd rather not even brush with a perceived conflict. I have no
Right.
control over what my appraisers do on their appraisals. They are their own licensed appraiser, but I still don't want anybody trying to connect dots. So we play it safe and do that. But in terms of I get hired by a lot of people, I think, because of the background in appraisal. They do see value in that. But again, I have to make it very clear I'm not acting as an appraiser here. They just know that they're getting the knowledge
Right.
that comes with somebody who's been a long time appraiser. So, um,
And that's what I explain to people too when we're doing the valuations for people's homes. I let them know, say, I'm been in the business 25 years, starting January of next year, 2026, starts my 26th year. And I'm going to do everything by the book, transparent as it is, because you know what? I'm getting too old to go do something else. If I did something because I was working for the commission and lost my real estate broker's license, I would be in some serious trouble. You might see me on the corner panhandle. No, I'm just joking. I wouldn't do that. But I'm just saying is that's the difference when you work with a seasoned professional versus maybe somebody that hasn't quite been in the business for as long. And, they're all supposed to have mentors, have brokers like myself. I field questions all day long. We're not a big company. There's 14 of us all together, but I'm fielding questions every day, and I think it's great because we're not the kind of company that just goes out and assumes. We get our facts straight. We make sure it's right. We're out there to protect the public and our clients. So that's the important thing. That's why we're talking about appraisals here today. It's just another layer of protection.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's why we're here doing what we're doing is we care about the profession, we care about what we do, we care about what we're putting out there. Um, we're not rushing through anything and just trying to collect a check. We're not we're not making any money doing a podcast. It's
Right.
just more informational. It's we're putting ourselves out there the best that we can and trying to share as much knowledge as we can with anybody who wants to listen.
Yeah, because
But
like I always say knowledge is power, but knowledge is also protection. Don't go into something blind. There was an old saying that someone taught me a long time ago about um, jumping into a pit of snakes. And sometimes that's what life and real estate and a transaction might be about for an unexperienced person. But at least if you know when you're going to jump into that pit, there's some snakes down in the bottom. You know how to deal with the situation. Same thing going in. If we can educate just one person, that was looking out there thinking about buying cash without an appraisal, hopefully that one person catches the podcast and thinks, you know what, maybe I ought to call these guys and find out more, because where I've seen it a lot is when people come into new money to them. Sometimes it might be an inheritance, some situation, and I've seen new money people make more mistakes than people that have had the money for a while, worked hard, made the investments, get it. And you know what? I'm all for the people, the new money people. Hey, you got it. You deserved it. However you got it, but protect it, protect it, and find out what I should be doing before I make that transaction of a purchase.
Yeah, and you know that's a whole nother episode right there. Having money and talking to a professional that can help you guide you through the nuances of building a portfolio and how to use that money to maximize that money. You know, we're not going to have time to go into all that,
Right.
but hiring somebody who's educated in that to help you navigate making the right decisions. You know, I think we talked about this before, but uh, you know, spending your money where you live isn't necessarily the right choice. Expand your area, expand your stuff. We cover as a company. You and I both are licensed to pretty much across the state,
Right.
and most of the MLSs. And have, you know, from my appraiser background all the way from metropolitan Phoenix area up into Mojave County, and you know, some stuff you're doing a lot down in La Paz. I don't do as much down there, but I did through my career as an appraiser. Um, you know, having somebody and hiring somebody that understands how to run those numbers and figure out how to make money with your money is a good tool to have if you are looking to invest. Don't just go, you know, I kind of think this sounds like a good deal. I should buy this house and I could rent it out. Well, are you going to be able to rent it for what you think you're going to be able to rent it? Is there better opportunities elsewhere that would get you a higher rate of return? You know, and
Yeah.
that's where hiring an agent or somebody that's knowledgeable in that information to be able to help you navigate that process.
Yeah, and that's definitely one that you and I will be doing because people, when they talk to me about money, my view of money, money's a tool. Okay, you put it in a savings account, you make very little return. And I'm not knocking the banks because I know it's good to have money in the bank, have some cash, have a 6 to 12 month reserve. And that extra money on top of that, it needs to be a tool. It needs to continue. Let that money work for you. And it doesn't necessarily, I would say, I don't know if I even have an investor. Boy, if I do, I apologize. That lives here in Lake Havasu City where I live. Now, again, like you, Jared, I spread all over the state of Arizona, and my investors come all. I was on a Zoom meeting with one from New Jersey this morning. They're only 2 hours ahead where they used to be 3 hours ahead. So now I only have to be at the office by 6:30 in the morning versus being at the office at 5:30 in the morning to do Zoom meetings. But you'll find that as we get in when we get into that, and part of that is still the appraisal. Just because you're buying an investment property, don't take it at face value. Have a professional. You're probably going to want to take a look at an appraisal on that, especially if you're running numbers, and we'll get to that on another podcast. But it's still in, even when you're doing the investment properties, appraisals are important because you got breakdowns, you got return on investment. If you don't have if you're putting too much money in to what you can get back out, whether you're investing in land, duplexes, homes, commercial properties, again, appraisals are very important in order to determine the return on investment.
Yeah, the only other thing before we go that I'll say about investments is what makes sense as an investment today isn't necessarily what's going to make sense as an investment tomorrow. It's constantly changing. New opportunities are always arising, and you know, there's just a million different things different ways you can go from commercial to residential to storage units, et cetera. I mean, but there's so many different things, and as agents, when somebody comes to me with an opportunity wanting to invest, I want to look at every possible angle. I want to look at it again. It doesn't matter what it is; it matters how much they're going to make with the money. You know,
That's it.
and you have to have money to make money, but there's opportunities in every market at every point in time, and to be able to invest. And what makes sense in Lake Havasu may not make sense in metropolitan Phoenix, and vice versa. You
Right.
know, So you want to have somebody that can analyze that data for you and really keep you educated on that. So
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this down here, but I'm definitely hoping here within the next week or so, you and I can get back together, Jared, with our schedules permitting, and let's talk a little bit more about investments in the real estate industry and what to look for and where to look for. So, and to make
yeah,
sure if you are going to do that, get a hold of some experienced people in the industry like Jared and myself that can lay out numbers for you. We have access to properties all throughout Arizona, and we can take a look at what your wants and needs are and help direct you to the right location and the right product.
yeah, I agree. I love working with investments. I love the challenge of trying to figure out what's a good opportunity right now that makes sense, and you know you don't want to you want to think outside the box there,
Yeah.
because like I said, there's not just one way to do it, and you don't want to put all your money in one basket. You want to spread it around. That when you're talking about portfolios, you want your portfolio to cross as many lines as you can so that they don't all follow the same trends, right?
So,
So
yeah. So, anyways, Jared, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you for appraisals, and let's we'll wrap this down for the day because boy, we get going on this next subject and we could be here for a week. Our wives will be calling saying, "Where the heck do you guys run off to?" But anyways, let
well,
everybody
I
know
mean,
how they can find you.
yeah, the best way to reach me would just be to contact me on my cell, either by phone call, leave a voicemail, or shoot me a text. My cell phone 623-204-9982, and that's really the easiest and fastest way to get a hold of me.
All
So
right, sounds good, Jared. Appreciate you being here today, and we'll be back to educate the public here shortly.
yeah, thanks for having me on, Tim.
All right, thank you.